Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and I'm the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. Today we're going to do a quick video here about border runs, what they are, and the recent developments which have caused basically an end to the phenomenon of border running. Basically what border runs are is it's essentially exactly what it sounds like. It's running up to a border, crossing said border, being stamped out of the Kingdom of Thailand, being stamped in immigration-wise by, say, immigration authorities in, say, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, or Malaysia, if you're that far down south. And so just hopping over and hopping back. People will do this often to maintain lawful status in the country. There are certain types of visas, most notably the multi-entry long-term non-immigrant visas, which require one to leave every 90 days. It only basically, those type of visas only provide 90 days of lawful status at a given time for those entering the country on those. That's not what we're really talking about here. We're not talking about border running for multi-entry visas. There's a new multi-entry tourist visa, which essentially allows for border running. It kind of requires border running. It's fairly new, so how it's being implemented still somewhat remains to be seen. What I'm really talking about in this video specifically is the sort of old school method of remaining in Thailand on what were called visa exemptions, sort of ad infinitum. Basically in the past, it was possible to remain in, you can come into Thailand. Anybody who's ever been to Thailand knows that they come into Thailand, no visa, and this is most passports, and even those passports that don't allow this system have what's called visa on arrival. There are very few passport types that do not have some sort of either visa on arrival or visa exemption status when passing into Thailand. But okay, let's say virtually, let's call it 90% of all passport holders around the world are going to come into Thailand and get some sort of visa on arrival or visa exemption. Let's say 75%, 65%, somewhere in there, of most people coming into Thailand are going to get what's called a visa exemption. The visa exemption is a 30-day stamp. It's issued at the airport. Or a land border. It's a very different thing from a visa itself. It provides 30 days of lawful status, notwithstanding the fact that the person holding this passport does not have a visa. The 30 days of lawful status in the past was essentially, up until about 8 years ago, roughly, it could have been granted infinitely. You could make sort of infinite border runs, and I know of people. Many people, in fact, who lived in Thailand that way. Just every 30 days, they'll pop over the border. And if you're near a border, near a land border in Thailand, that's a fairly easy thing to do. Starting about 8 years ago, this sort of started to be coming to a close. The first thing they implemented through essentially ministerial regulations within the Department of the Interior, the Immigration Police, first thing they started doing is saying, okay, you can't spend... The way that they looked at it was, if you're spending more than 6 months in Thailand in exemption status a year, you essentially were trying to live here, and that's not what those types of stamps were supposed to be used for. So it was my experience at the time that most people, that there were some who could live in Thailand on, say, half the year on exemption stamps, the other half on long-term tourist visas or non-immigrant visas, issued for 90 days. This was possible about 8 years ago. And that operated for about 3 years, as I recall. And that was sort of the way that things sort of worked. You could kind of cobble together your status between exemption stamps and other types of visas. Then about 5 years ago, roughly, they sort of did away with that, and they essentially came up with a program where they said, okay, at land borders, you're only going to get 15 days worth of status as opposed to 30 days worth of status. Airports and I believe water ports, one could still get a 30-day stamp in exemption status. Now, to be clear, these are not visas. These are visa exemption stamps, different thing. These are two different things entirely. They implemented that. It sort of had some mixed results. Here recently, and for most people who are watching this video, this is going to be the most pertinent information. That's just some sort of history. Here recently, a new program has been implemented called Good Guys In, Bad Guys Out by the Royal Thai Immigration Police. Under this program, there's been a new regime for blacklisting. You can check out another video on this channel with respect to blacklisting in Thailand and how that can happen for overstayers. Basically, good guys in, bad guys out brought in a whole new system for dealing with overstaying. In the past, I won't even go into it. Check out that other video. For the purposes of this, it also had an impact and is having an impact still on 30-day exemption stamps. Most notably, it's been my experience through anecdotal evidence of clients of our firm, of people I've talked to, they'll be coming into Thailand and they'll be on their 6th exemption stamp for the year. And it won't be necessarily all 6 are right together. Many people who spend a great deal of time in Thailand in a given year are going to be offshore workers, people who have a fairly transient lifestyle, but there's not necessarily anything untoward about that lifestyle. It's simply the way that they choose to operate. They live and work and sort of move around on a fairly frequent basis. Also, long-term travelers who come to Thailand. It was my experience about 2 years ago when this good guys in, bad guys out first started being rolled out. People were telling me, oh, I was at the airport and they said, you've got too many exemption stamps, you're going to need to seriously consider getting a proper visa. In most cases, people would just go and get a proper tourist visa rather than coming in on exemption stamps. And in those cases where it was people just wanted to stay here for periodic short-term durations, that worked. The thing that sort of changed and has changed is, one, people started using tourist visas and the frequency of tourist visas started going up. At certain borders, especially down south near Phuket, it was, and even along the Cambodian border, I had heard news and I'd heard sort of secondhand from people who actually experienced this, being turned away even with a proper tourist visa and being told you're using this to live here, a tourist visa is for tourism, that's not what this is for. This was sort of the interim situation, which brings us to today. It's my understanding that as of December 31st, pursuant to publication in the Royal Thai Gazette, it will no longer be possible to obtain an exemption stamp more than 2 times at a border in Thailand, okay, at a land border in Thailand. So basically the border run as a means of maintaining long-term presence in Thailand is effectively dead. If an individual tries to get more than 2 exemption stamps, it's just not going to happen. And it's important to note that this was through publication in the Royal Thai Gazette, which is the publication of record for purposes of making law in Thailand. This is not a regulation that was promulgated internally through the immigration apparatus in Thailand. This is the equivalent in the U.S. system of it being published in the Federal Register. Okay, this is the law now. Okay, this is going to be implemented in a much less discretionary manner than immigration regulations have been dealt with before. And that's the thing that you will hear a lot from people out here, and it gets frustrating for those who really don't understand the system. These powers are discretionary. An officer may look at someone and say, yeah, I buy it, this looks kosher. May see somebody else and not want to let them in, and they're operating under the same powers. Again, discretionary powers of the officers involved. This is a pretty big sea change moving forward starting January 1 of 2017. It's not really going to be possible to utilize exemption stamps for long-term presence in Thailand, because effectively the border run is a thing of the past now as far as using it for exemption purposes. Now, some other things that have changed that are sort of an upshot of all of these border run policy changes. They've created a 6-month multi-entry tourist visa, which, depending on who you talk to, and our firm doesn't really handle a lot of those directly, but depending on who you talk to, there are varying degrees of difficulty to get. The other thing that has happened is things like retirement visas are becoming more sought out because it's not so easy to get presence using exemption stamps. And the other thing that it's notable that the Thai government has gone ahead and implemented programs in the last couple of years, or re-implemented programs in some cases, and is currently promulgating programs to make longer term, like large long-term visas, a possibility for people here. For example, the proposed 10-year retirement visa. There's another video on this channel which discusses that. And also the Thailand Elite Card, which at one time was essentially a VIP
scheme that provided long-term visa status for the holder. At one time, one had just a single option, which was a large lump sum payment to get into that system. Now they've sort of broken it out into smaller 5-year increments, which can be purchased or which can be entered into for a lower overall fee. So they've implemented certain longer-term strategies on one side, or longer-term options for those who want to stay, and on the other side, effectively, the method of cobbling together long-term presence in Thailand on an ad hoc basis is basically at an end. The border run is essentially over. It can be used maybe in a one-off scenario, but as far as it goes for the future, this is a significant issue and a major sea change as far as immigration regulation in Thailand goes.